Zoo, and thank you so much for being here with us on the Thrive Bites podcast. This is season 4, and we're so excited for you to be here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Colin Zhu, double boarded in family and lifestyle medicine, and I interview the best and most passionate health and wellness experts of the industry on this platform. And we talk about plant-powered living, emotional resilience, and creating a thriving mindset. And this season, we're taking it live, we're taking it on multiple platforms, and we're taking it as a Q&A discussion as well as our interviewing of our guests. So we're super stoked about this, and please remember to like and subscribe down below, and we will see you. Welcome to the next episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Thrive Bites podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Colin Zhu, and thank you so much for being here with us on the show. You could be anywhere else in the world, and I greatly appreciate that you spend just a few moments with us for today's episode. So I cannot wait for today's episode, and we have a very, very special guest. And we have a topic that I believe needs to be in the forefront in terms of people's consciousness, and it's a very somewhat sensitive topic. I think we have a perfect guest to be able to reiterate this. And the topic for today is called Thriving After Sexual Abuse. Our special guest today is Denise Bossarte, and she is a survivor of sexual abuse. She is a self-published author, and she wrote the book Thriving After Sexual Abuse: Break Your Bondage to the Past and Live a Life You Love. And it's her story about abuse and her healing journey. And she wanted to make known to people that she has made the moves from going from survivor to thriver. And this book has been published since in April in this year, 2021. And a little bit about her. She spent most of her adult life on a healing journey to recover from this childhood event. And she's used multiple practices in her healing journey. And that includes, but not limited to, therapy, yoga, meditation, being in nature, and creative expression. And that includes the arts, photography, writing poetry, fiction, and nonfiction. And a little bit about her book. It is an eloquent and empathetic self-development book laying out a blueprint for survivors to heal themselves. Denise writes with fierce candor as she shares her own traumatic experience with childhood sexual abuse. Thriving provides tips and suggestions for readers to seek help, self-reflect, and pursue healing through a range of activities and practices, and offers tangible strategies for readers to reclaim their lives and move forward to a life of thriving. And I'm sure the audience has known, those that have been following us, that we're all about thriving here. So I cannot wait to introduce, please welcome Denise. Hello.
Hello, Dr. Zhu. Thank you so much for having me with you this evening, being live, sharing some healing and thriving tips for everyone.
No, the pleasure is all mine. I'm really, really, really thrilled for you to be here. And we were talking a little bit off camera, and we were just saying how this is a subject that's definitely under talked. Whether it is taboo, whether it can be cultural, whether it can be something where it inhibits us from really sharing and expressing all the different feelings and emotions that can stem from, this type of traumatic experience. So, I definitely appreciate you showing up, having the strength and courage, sharing your story, with us, and, continuing on that journey to, share with us through your work. So I thank you, for that, number one. And so let's get straight into it. Can you, a lot about, how we start with this podcast is the origin story. So in your words, in however much, detail you're comfortable sharing, is, just sharing your accounts with this event that you've had in your childhood that has led you, on this journey.
Sure. And I grew up in a family that from the outside looked like it was a pretty normal family. My dad was a doctor, and my mom had her own business. And so everything looked fine from the outside, but unfortunately that wasn't really true for what was going on behind the scenes. So I was sexually abused by my grandfather, my mother's father. And it would happen when we would go to their log cabin on the lake for the summer. We would go and just hang out there for the summer, and that's where the events happened. Now, it started when I was very young. I don't know exactly when it started, but based on kind of my height versus the adults that I was interacting with, I know that it was early elementary school. And those things that he did to me continued until I was a freshman in high school, and they stopped because he died. He got cancer and then he died. So I don't know if it would have stopped if he hadn't died. But I'm like a lot of trauma survivors. I do not have a way to easily put the events of the abuse in the timeline of my normal life. They're like disconnected. So I have very specific memories, very intense memories, but I couldn't tell you, what age I was when various things happened. And I was just absolutely terrified of the man. I think in the terminology of today, he'd be considered a narcissist. He was very controlling, manipulative, very bright. And he gave this impression that if I ever told anyone, a lot of bad things were going to happen. And so I was just afraid. I was ashamed of what was happening. I didn't understand it. A child that young, your brain isn't developed enough to be able to process that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so I think my brain tried to protect me and tried to help me not remember the events between when they were happening every summer. And I learned when the events were happening to dissociate in my body so that I could get through the events. And so that kind of was my state until he died. And here I am, a freshman in a high school. He dies. And I think my brain suddenly said, it's safe. It's safe to remember all this. And it was like I was going insane because I had all these visualizations, all these body memories of being touched. And then the shame really kicked in very strongly. And I didn't tell anybody again because I was just too ashamed. You have such a high level of shame. You are just so afraid of being rejected. So afraid that if you tell someone, they won't believe you, particularly back when I was in high school. There wasn't a lot of understanding about sexual abuse, and people were inclined to try not to face it head on. And I just was afraid of the rejection because what my grandfather did to me, it instilled in me that I was worthless, unlovable, and that I deserved what was happening to me. So why would I ever go and advocate for myself if I was taught that I was this worthless person? And so that kind of put me in a place where I didn't know what to do. I didn't have any resources. And I basically funneled every bit of energy I had into doing well in school, which is a good thing, right? Mm-hmm. It was a somewhat healthy way of dealing with it. I was in band and basketball, and I really dug into getting good grades. And that's kind of what carried me through, not dealing with the abuse, not dealing with the emotional impacts, the physical impacts, just really squishing it down until I got into college. And then I started dating a graduate student who was an alcoholic, and recovering alcoholic, and he went to Alcoholics Anonymous, and he suggested I get some help and to join a group that would be similar to what he had. So there's a 12-step program for survivors of Incest Anonymous. And I got into that. I got into some individual therapy. I got into group therapy. And that's when I really started working on trying to figure out, what can I do different? How can I live my life different? How can I move away from what happened to me and being a victim to moving forward through surviving into thriving? And so I did the therapy while I was in school. And then eventually I learned that wasn't enough for me. It helped me heal to a certain extent. But as you mentioned in the introduction, I started exploring other ways to help heal myself because I had a real bad body image. I really hated my body. I was ashamed of it, afraid of it. And so I decided to try to get into doing some yoga to reconnect with my body and open my body up and get rid of all of those body memories and learn to be present in my body, to connect to it, to appreciate it, and maybe even to like it for the first time in my life, right? And then that got me introduced into other modalities like meditation. So I learned that not only did I need to work with my body, I needed to work with my mind. Because in protecting myself from that voice I would hear of my grandfather saying I was worthless, unlovable, and deserved what was happening, I developed this perfectionist side. And there was now another voice beating me up because you can never be perfect. So I was always failing to meet that expectation I put on myself. So I decided I needed to try to work with that, to try to get rid of those two voices, to get some peace of mind and really start connecting to my authentic voice again, my internal authentic voice. And so that was another piece. I started just bringing these in, and there was no real blueprint. There was no book that would walk me through, try this, this is how you get connected, this is how you find these things, these are the questions you should ask when you go to explore doing these different things. There was nothing like that. So I just stumbled along. There wasn't like I had a vision. First I'm going to do X, then I'm going to do Y. It was like, I need help. What can I do? And so I slowly started finding things that really helped me and were making a difference for me. And I started getting into the art. I really connected with nature, and piece by piece, practice by practice, I started developing what to me was my healing journey to help me move away from being defined by my past to defining my present and future for myself.
Wow. That's well, number one, thank you, so much for, sharing that. And there's a lot to tease out there. And but what I've gotten from that is, it's almost like, especially when something happens, so young, and you're still figuring it out, you're still trying to be a kid, you're still trying to grow up, and you have something like this happens. It, to me, so I practice family medicine, but I am not a therapist, I'm not a psychiatrist. But I would imagine how, when you're growing up and you're developing not just physically, but you're also developing emotionally and mentally, right? So when you have something like that happen, it's almost like you don't know what is normal and you don't know what is abnormal, right? Because it's almost like you haven't really, it's kind of like putting something in the microwave, right? And it's not done yet, right? And it's still going, right? So it's kind of like, in a very simplistic, view, it's like, we haven't really matured, to that adult age and an adult brain and adult body to be able to make these mature and rational decisions for ourselves, right? Given that, we have developed healthfully, right? So it's almost like, you have that added challenge of, almost compartmentalizing. I would probably imagine for some victims to go through. You would have to filter some things. You would have to, just almost kind of start over in many different parts of your life. Does that sound,
Yeah, that resonates with me because I really lost my childhood. He stole my childhood away from me. I was not allowed to be a child, pushed into sexuality and practices and acts that were way beyond my age by any stretch of the imagination, and very confusing because you're supposed to be learning about your body and learning what's good and pleasant and enjoyable in your body, but then it's overlaid with this kind of gross, icky, this is not right that's happening to me. And so it gets really mixed up and confused for people who are having natural body reactions, but it's in the context of something that is just not right. And I think that for me, it really set the tone for my development in the sense that I learned very young that the world's not a safe place. And the people who are supposed to love and take care of you can hurt you. And so that really was sort of like a worldview where I was just ready for anybody to hurt me, anybody to reject me. Talk about with trauma survivors, the hypervigilance, like you're waiting for the next thing to come at you. That was certainly my experience, that I just was struggling to find a way to keep moving forward because I just had so much shame and just really couldn't see a way to get out of it except to, again, throw myself into school and get what little accolades and praise I could from that environment, while the rest of my life was kind of falling apart.
Yeah. So I guess for me, an obvious follow-up to this would be, does your, and I don't want to assume, but do the rest of your family know And how have they, I guess, processed and or reacted to the event over time?
Yeah, so I didn't tell my family for a long time because as a young child, you assume that you have all this power and responsibility. You're told it was your fault. You told it was brought on by who you were and what you did. And so I translated that into this sense of I could destroy people's lives if I shared this. I could destroy my parents' marriage. I could, bring all this negativity to my family. So there's this weird sense of power of corrupting the rest of my family if I
Yeah.
shared this. But eventually, through all the practices that I did, I connected with an older cousin who had been abused, and she was supportive to help me keep going and getting help. And I told my sister, and unfortunately, I didn't think to tell my sister, don't tell my parents. So she went and she told them. And the next thing you know, the next conversation it's brought up. And I was like totally unprepared, but I'm like, okay, well, here it is. Everyone that I told in my family believed me. They validated the experience. Obviously my parents were just stricken by the fact that this was going on and they weren't picking up on it, weren't aware of it. And, I had struggled with that for a long time until Dr. Larry Nassar's story came out where he was actually sexually abusing these gymnasts in front of their parents in the same room. So for me, that kind of helped me understand that my parents maybe were busy with their lives and they just didn't pick up on what was going on. And, I had a choice with each of the members of my family, my grandmother, my cousin, my sister, my parents. Do I tell them, one? And two, what do I do? Do I continue those relationships, particularly the people that had some responsibility for protecting me and didn't? Or do I let those go? And I made this decision for myself to keep those people in my life, to move forward and say, okay, this is an important relationship for me to maintain. I'm going to just move forward beyond what they may or may not have known and build a relationship. And I'm really glad I did, because all of those relationships have been so nourishing and supportive for me going forward.
Yeah, yeah. That is very tough because, you're trying to balance, because that is a very weird thing to have, right? That unspoken power to either destroy lives or, by what's happened. And it's not something that you probably intentionally wanted. It just transpired. And now you have it. And it's like, what do I do with this next? Right. And, I'm glad that you shared and communicated. I'm also, glad that your family responded the way they responded. And so, yeah, my next question, an obvious next question that I came up with was, do you feel, have you made peace or, have you, made peace with where you're at right now? Like, have you reached a point where you can say to yourself, Denise, I'm okay. I've accepted, where I've been. Like, where are you in that journey?
Yeah, I am now. Obviously, it wasn't easy to get to that point. There was a lot of anger and fear and shame all mixed together, and really just being so angry at him for what he did and for people not protecting me. But I realized that all that energy I was putting into those feelings was keeping me in the mode of being the victim. It was keeping me connected to him and what had happened to me. And I had this visualization one day that I was connected to him like this. He was this ball and chain connected to me. And it was just, can I get rid of this? How can I move past this? It just seemed like it couldn't happen. And then all of a sudden I just visualized that chain opening and the ball and chain disappearing. And I thought, I could put all of that energy from what I'm doing to kind of hold off, admitting that it happened and dealing with the negativity and all that mess that was part of being a victim. I could take that energy and I could turn it around and put it into my life in a positive way and into my life for healing. And that was a real pivotal moment for me to realize I had that kind of control over my life to make that decision. It was easier for me in some ways, I have to be honest, because he was dead. I didn't have to be with him, around him in any way after realizing what had happened. So it was easier for me to make that shift in some ways because it was a clean break with a memory rather than a live person. But that was a shift that I made. And at that point, I just started really getting focused on my work and my healing. and not worrying about what other people were thinking or doing and just moving forward,
Mm.
to the point where I think he probably was abused himself. You know how that happens. It goes through generations. I think he was abused, and I kind of feel sorry for him
Mhm.
that he went after these really creative, intelligent, energetic women. You know, you could see the different women in our family that he went after and abused had this sort of personality type. And I just thought, you're just so sad because you could have had these women loving you in a real healthy relationship, but instead you were so, I don't know, beaten down and scared and surviving that you just try to crush other people. And
Yeah.
that's really what I see it as, was he was trying to control. And I'm at
Yeah.
the point where I don't forgive him for what he did. What he did was not right, but I also don't dwell on it. I just you're just a real sad person. And it's
Yeah.
unfortunate that I had to go through that and had to go through so much work to heal. But again, my energy is facing forward and
Yeah.
keeping what I need to do to keep me moving in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. It's we're kind of left to kind of deal with the cards that were dealt and figure out, what do I deal? How do I move forward? What do I do with this deck, right?
Mhm.
And some are more fortunate than others, and vice versa. And it's really about, how do you react to a certain situation. So in a in a in an interest on a lighter note, it's given you the ability to speak from a certain experience or platform, or just knowingness and awareness of, that you can help others, because obviously, and we're going to go into like facts and statistics later on, but this obviously has happened. This happens globally, and it's giving, you have a voice, you're voicing, you're expressing it, and it's going to help others. So again, it's a very powerful thing, and I thank you for doing what you're doing. Just to kind of digress to another question, what do you think might have changed or may have changed if this event didn't occur in your life?
Yeah, you emailed me that question ahead of time, and that's the first time anyone's asked me that. I've thought about it a little bit in the past, but I really spent some time thinking about it, and it's hard to piece apart, the possibilities of what might have happened. I think that my drive to learn and my curiosity and wanting to do well in school, I think that would have continued. I think there would have been a lot less perfectionism and anxiety about succeeding well and proving I was worthy through getting good grades. I could just enjoy learning.
Mm,
I definitely think it would be a very different experience with my body. I had such a dissociative experience and then a negative, hateful experience with my body that continued for a long time. It probably wouldn't have been that. I don't know what it might have been, but it would have just been a normal reaction to your body, mostly neutral probably. I think that I would have not been afraid of
mm,
people so much in the world, and I might have made more connections with people, been able to be more vulnerable and more trusting with
mm,
people. I had friends, and some of them were pretty deep friends, but not very many. And the part for me that's hard to tease from the abuse versus just my natural introverted personality, so there's going to be some part of that that's not full blown, party animal, but
yeah.
I really think it was how I viewed the world would be different.
Hmm.
My levels of anxiety and fear would be much different. My relationship with my body would be different. So I think a lot of things would have shifted. But given that question, I look at everything that's happened and everything that I've done, and I don't know that I would have changed anything because I'm in a place where I'm thriving and I enjoy what I do. And I don't know those branches, right, that could have happened if that sexual abuse wasn't part of my life. I don't know if have ended up in the same place and being
Hmm.
the same person that I really am happy to be. So,
Yeah.
it's kind of double-edged sword, you
Yeah.
know, and what could be
Yeah.
different, or, it could have gone some completely different direction. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I
It's
think
definitely
that's mainly.
yeah, I think it's obviously, there's no right or wrong to that. It's a very thought-provoking question. When I was thinking about, how to, formulate and interview you, would be, I mean, I think it's day to day, how we go about our lives, what if we've made different choices in our lives, and how would our lives would have shaped or end up, what kind of outcomes would have, like you said, the branches, it could have been a different, for sure, it could have been an entirely different life branch, life journey, type of pathway. But I think it's more of a fun for food for thought of, how would, this life would have been different. And then when you think about it, it's kind of reflecting on how something, whether it's like a car accident, for you, it's a, sexual abuse event, for others, it's, cancer, whatever have you, how much of an impact that has made, right? There's some events that will make very minuscule, and there's some, life altering, right?
Yeah, the ripples just keep going with some events. Yeah.
Exactly. So guys, if you guys are just tuning in, this is Thriving After Sexual Abuse here on Thrive Bites Podcast. We're going to go on a quick commercial break. And please, if you have any comments or questions that you want to ask Denise, please type it in, and we'll definitely ask her live. And we'll go into break, and we'll be right back.
One of the things I believe really deeply is that resilience doesn't come from what you can do. It comes from overcoming the things you thought you couldn't do. We can keep replaying that event in our minds. A lot of us do that, right? And we can get stuck on that hamster wheel, or we can decide that we're not going to let the obstacle be in the way. We're just going to create it as an opportunity. And so for me, it's always an opportunity for growth. I say create that mindset of like the victor, not the victim. Every emotion has value. It's how long do we want to stay in them, right? Before we start to take action toward what we want next.
All right. So for those of you that are joining us back, this is Thriving After Sexual Abuse here on the Thrive Bites Podcast. I'm here with Denise Bossarte. Is that how you pronounce it? I keep getting it wrong. I wanted to share some, some statistics, and you can probably definitely enlighten us on what you've gathered over time. But this is just off of the CDC website. Some quick facts about sexual violence. More than one in three women experience sexual violence involving physical contact during their lifetime. 1 in 3 female rape victims experience it for the first time between 11 and 17 years old. Nearly 1 in 4 men experience sexual violence involving physical contact during their lifetime. And believe it or not, about 1 in 4 male rape victims reported that it occurred before the age of 10. And the list goes on and on. There's a lot of things about sexual childhood, trafficking, and then also global statistics. 1 in 3 women globally experience violence, and that's from the World Health Organization. So the next question for you, Denise, is what would you like to share to the general audience? I'm sure you've done your own research with sexual abuse, but what would you like to kind of impart? I guess from we've talked a lot about your story. We've talked about your own personal anecdotal experience, but what are some things, whether it's facts or statistics or figures, that you would like to impart to the general audience that we may not know about, involving with sexual abuse?
Yeah, I think that the statistics you presented are very powerful. They're heartbreaking, but they're powerful. 1 in 5 children is sexually abused before they turn 18. So if you imagine getting on an elevator and you're one and there's 4 other people in the room, in that space, there's someone there that has been sexually abused. And what people may not realize is the understanding of how victims will have long-term consequences for that, mental health consequences, more likely to develop drug abuse, more likely to experience PTSD, more likely to be depressed, have major depressive episodes. So it's not just the event that happened when you were a child and the immediacy of that event. These are things that if you don't heal from these events will continue to impact your life going forward. And it's mental health wise, it's also the statistics show that even in work, there's lower performance, lower income over time. So, I mean, it impacts your entire life if you don't find a way to deal with it. And that's really what I want to let people know is, one, you're not alone with whatever you've experienced. And I want people to think about how strong they are, that they've gotten through that experience. It may not have been easy. You may still feel totally overwhelmed by the experience and how it's impacting your life, but you made it through to this point. You have survived, and you have that strength in you to turn around and say, I deserve to heal. I deserve something better. I deserve love and appreciation and respect, and I deserve joy and gratitude in my life. And as I described, you can turn that energy to healing, and you can heal yourself, have self-compassion for yourself. And for me, it's really critical for people, if they can possibly do it, to find some professional help. We've learned so much about trauma, and there's so many more resources with somatic therapy. There is trauma-informed yoga, trauma-informed meditation. There's so many things that are available online now, right? Especially with COVID and everybody going digital. There are resources that you can tap into to get support. There are groups out there you can connect with to meet other people and get their support, get their understanding of things that you can do. You know, my book that I wrote it as sort of a guide. So you get parts of my story, but then I describe the different things I did and how you might go about discovering what works for you, because everyone's story is different. Everyone's experience is different. So I'm making some suggestions, showing how it worked for me, and then encouraging people to find their own way, find their own path, and encouraging them to continue to work, because we all deserve that, right? We all deserve to be happy, have a great life, and we don't have to be defined by our past. We can define our future.
Definitely. Very, very well said. So let's talk more about, because you express yourself in many different ways. If I, correct me if I'm wrong, you're a photographer, right? You just self-published this book. What was the motivation? Obviously, it can be very apparent and very obvious, but what was the motivation to do it in this way, for you to write, for you to, actually, publish a book? Because, I, self-published a book myself, and it takes a lot, it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of, so what was it for you that, I guess, kept you going, through the process to create something to let others know? Yeah,
I mean, for a long time, I was told by my husband that he wanted me to share my story. So, he encouraged me to do it, but it's not something that I could actually have the strength to do at the time. And part of it was, I don't have a cohesive story. I don't have a story of, here's, a memoir where it started and then it progressed on through different stages, like some people could do. And for a long time, I didn't do anything with that. And I wrote poetry that was a way to be releasing a lot of the emotions that I was having. And the poetry was sort of a journaling that got me from the initial abuse up through where I was healing. But it really was kind of on the back burner, because I thought, there's no way to really describe it to people in a way that would really be helpful. And then I heard this about Larry Nassar and the abuse of the gymnast. And it just struck a chord in my heart that there are people out there who need to heal, and like these gymnasts. And I may not have a memoir in me, but I have a healing journey that I can share. To write a book I wish I had, and to really make it available for people, to help them have a blueprint that they could use to start learning about it. And it was really just realizing with the Me Too movement and the Larry Nassar story that there was a need for people to be able to have a resource that could help guide them, because that was the hardest part. Is like, where do you start? How do I start dealing with this thing that seems so overwhelming? And so that's what I really wanted to do. Is, my book is set up where you learn a little bit about my story, and then I walk you through, how do you step by step get connected with a yoga studio or a yoga teacher? How do you find these things? Where do you go? I've got resources. I've got what I call my healing journey library, where I recommend books, because I did a lot of reading. So I'm trying to share not just my story, but be an inspiration and kind of structure it so you can kind of follow along and get started, and then continue whatever works for you.
That's awesome. Yeah. In a way, it's almost like it's not just the experience, but you're also helping to kind of shortcut it in a way, so, people are not trying to finagle and trying to,
stumble along.
yeah. Kind of like, you're saying how, when you started, you were doing this and you're doing that. And how like I wish I had this book that I wrote. So it's a perfect setup. And we'll definitely include the links for the facts, the figures, and your book in the show notes in a moment after the show. So I definitely want to close out. Thank you so much. And my question to you would be, what are the top three things, given everything we've talked about, what are the top three things you would like the audience to impart with? It could be from your healing journey. It could be, just objectively, just informing people about more about, sexual abuse that we don't already know so far. What are the top three things you would like to kind of the audience to take away with?
Yeah, so I'd say one, I kind of touched on this before, but one, believe in yourself. Believe that you deserve to have a change in your life and to move from surviving to thriving, that everyone deserves that chance. It's going to be hard work. It's going to take a lot of effort, but it's going to be so worth it because you're working to make your life better for yourself. And I would also say, be really self-compassionate along the way. Healing is not get on the Autobahn and drive to 200 miles an hour to healing destination, right? It's kind of a spiral of events. And so as you're trying to make progress, as you're trying to change, don't get down on yourself, as sometimes you don't go as far as fast as you think you should. Be real compassionate, be real gentle, get the support in place that you need to help you on the journey. Therapists are a wonderful resource to help you and guide you through. And then find what works for you. That to me is really important. What is it that brings you joy? What is it that you find that is healing to your emotions, to your body, to your brain, to your mind, to your spirit? Find those things that are that for you and get more of those. Immerse yourself in those. Really learn how to engage with those activities to support yourself. So those would be the things that I would recommend.
Okay. Well, I love it. I love it. And for those that are actually watching, I've included a national sexual assault hotline created by the RAIN organization. And for those that are listening, it's 1-800-656-HOPE, H-O-P-E, 1-800-656-HOPE, H-O-P-E. It's free, it's 24/7. We have a lot of resources, including the wonderful and fabulous Denise here with her fabulous book, and being able to dispense, her journey to impart for our audience. And so if you know anyone that may or may not, be a victim of sexual abuse, definitely reach out and connect. And, if they are, we got to start that healing journey. So Denise, thank you so much for being here with us. And, I really, greatly appreciate it. And please continue doing what you're doing. So if people want to reach out to you or find you, where can they go?
Yeah, the best place is probably to start with my website, thrivingaftersexualabusebook.com. And from there, it's got all the links to all the different social media. It's got information about my book, the different podcasts I've been on. The book has won awards, so you can learn all about the praise for the book. And my final point would be that this isn't a book just for survivors. It actually is a great resource for partners and families of survivors, for therapists, for their clients. So just because you're not a survivor yourself, you may know someone that could benefit. So keep that in mind.
Definitely, definitely. So I think we can all stand to benefit from understanding each other's traumatic and hopefully eventual healing journey. So there's always something to learn. So again, Denise, thank you so much for being here. Guys, thank you so much for watching another episode of Thrive Bites podcast. You can catch us every week. And please say goodbye to Miss Denise. Guys, thank you so much for watching that episode. We hope you enjoy it. And please remember to like and subscribe down below so you can get continuous updates for future episodes and future guests. And we can't wait for this upcoming season. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you on the next episode.